The August sun beat down mercilessly on the New Mexico territory, as Dorothy Grace hauled another bucket up from the well behind her father's homestead, only to watch in dismay as the rope snapped, and the bucket plummeted back into the darkness with a hollow splash that echoed her sinking heart. She stood there in her faded calico dress, dust coating the hem, sweat trickling down her temples despite the bonnet shading her face. Her father had been gone 3 weeks now, buried beside her mother in the small cemetery on the hillside, and Dorothy had been trying to manage the failing homestead alone ever since. She was 20 years old, unmarried, and increasingly aware that she might not survive another month in this harsh land without help. The well was her lifeline, and now even that seemed to be abandoning her. Dorothy peered down into the stone-lined shaft, trying to see the bucket in the shadows below. The sun was directly overhead now, and she could just make out the glimmer of water far beneath. She had no more rope, no more buckets. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, and the town of Westcliff was a full day's journey by wagon. She felt tears of frustration burning her eyes but refused to let them fall. She had cried enough these past weeks. That looks like trouble. The voice startled her so badly she nearly fell forward into the well. Dorothy spun around to find a man on horseback watching her from about 20 yards away. He sat easy in the saddle, a tall figure silhouetted against the bright sky. His hat was pushed back slightly, revealing dark hair and a weathered face that looked to be in his late 20s. He wore practical working clothes, a vest over a cotton shirt, and sturdy boots. A coil of rope hung from his saddle. "I did not hear you ride up," Dorothy said, her hand pressed to her chest where her heart hammered. Out here alone, any stranger could be dangerous, though something about his calm demeanor and the gentle way he held his reins suggested he meant no harm. "Did not mean to startle you, madam. Saw you from the ridge and noticed you seemed to be having difficulties." He dismounted smoothly, leading his horse closer. "Name is Ryder Calloway. I run cattle about 10 miles north of here." "Dorothy Grace," she replied, relaxing slightly. She had heard the name Calloway before. Her father had mentioned a successful rancher who had come to the territory 5 years ago and built up a good operation through hard work and fair dealing. "My well rope broke. The bucket is down there, and I have no way to retrieve it or draw water." Ryder approached the well and looked down into it, assessing the situation with a practiced eye. "How deep is it?" "About 40 feet, I believe. My father dug it 7 years ago when we first settled here. Stone-lined, good construction." He straightened and walked back to his horse, untying the rope from his saddle. "I can fish that bucket out for you and replace the rope. This one should hold for years if you treat it right." "I cannot pay you," Dorothy said quickly, shame coloring her cheeks. "My father passed recently, and what little money we had went to settling his debts." Ryder paused in his work, his gray eyes meeting hers with unexpected kindness. "No payment necessary, Miss Grace. Out here, we help each other when we can. That is how folks survive." He set to work with efficient movements that spoke of years of practical experience. Dorothy watched as he fashioned a hook from a piece of wire he pulled from his saddlebag, tied it securely to his rope, and began lowering it into the well. The rope played out through his calloused hands steadily until it reached the bottom. He jiggled it carefully, trying to snag the bucket handle. "Tell me about your father's place," Ryder said as he worked, his voice conversational. "Looks like he was starting to grow vegetables over there." "He tried," Dorothy said, grateful for the distraction from her worries. "But the irrigation was never quite right, and then he got sick last winter. He never fully recovered his strength. The fever took him in July. I am sorry for your loss." The simple sincerity in his voice touched something in Dorothy's chest, Most people offered empty platitudes, but Ryder spoke as someone who understood genuine loss. "Thank you. Were you alone when you started your ranch?" "I was," he confirmed, still working the rope. "Came out here after the war. Lost my family back in Missouri to sickness, lost friends to bullets. Figured New Mexico was as good a place as any to start over. Got there." The last was said with satisfaction as he felt the hook catch something. He began pulling up the rope hand over hand, the muscles in his forearms flexing with the effort. Dorothy found herself noticing the way the sunlight caught in his dark hair, the strong line of his jaw, the focused competence in everything he did. She had seen few unmarried men her age in these parts, most of them rough prospectors or drifters. Ryder Calloway seemed different, solid, and dependable. The bucket emerged from the well, water still sloshing in its bottom. Ryder set it aside and examined the old rope. This was frayed badly. "You are fortunate it did not break while you were leaning over the well. Could have pulled you right in." A chill ran through Dorothy at the thought. "I had not considered that. Out here, you have to think about everything." He untied the old rope and began securing his new one to the bucket handle with knots that looked complex but held firm. A moment's carelessness can be the difference between life and death. He tested the knots, then lowered the bucket back into the well and drew it up full of clear, cold water. "There, that should serve you well." "I am deeply grateful, Mr. Calloway." "Ryder," he corrected, removing his hat and wiping his brow with his sleeve. "Mr. Calloway was my father." Dorothy smiled despite herself. "Then you must call me Dorothy." He nodded, settling his hat back on his head. His eyes scanned the homestead, taking in the sagging barn door, the vegetable garden choked with weeds, the fence that needed mending. "You planning to stay here alone?" The question was direct but not unkind. Dorothy felt her spine straighten. "I have nowhere else to go. This is my home." A woman alone in this territory faces considerable hardship. "I am aware of that." Her voice came out sharper than she intended, defensive pride rising up. "But I am not without skills. My father taught me to shoot, to ride, to work the land." "I do not doubt your capabilities," Ryder said carefully. "But there is work here for 3 men and you are 1 woman. How will you manage the heavy repairs? What happens when trouble comes? And out here, trouble always comes eventually." Dorothy had no answer for that. The same questions had kept her awake these past nights, staring at the ceiling of her small bedroom, trying to figure out how to survive. "I will manage somehow." Ryder was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. She met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away first. Finally, he spoke. "I have a proposition for you, Dorothy. Hear me out before you answer." Her heart began to beat faster. "I am listening. My ranch is successful. I have good grazing land, a solid house, enough cattle to provide a comfortable living. But I am alone there, and the loneliness weighs heavy after 5 years. I need a partner, someone to share the work and the life." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "You need help surviving. We could help each other." "Are you suggesting what I think you are suggesting?" Dorothy's voice came out barely above a whisper. "I am asking if you would consider becoming my wife," Ryder said plainly. "I know we just met, and I know this is sudden. I am not a romantic man, Dorothy. I cannot offer you poetry or fancy words. But I can offer you a good home, protection, respect, and a full partnership in building something lasting. In time, I hope we might build affection as well, maybe even love. But I would not demand that. I would be content with companionship and mutual respect." Dorothy's mind reeled. An hour ago, she had been alone and desperate. Now a man she had just met was proposing marriage. It should have seemed absurd, yet in the practical reality of frontier life, such arrangements were not uncommon. Women needed protection and provision. Men needed partners and helpmeets. Love was a luxury that could grow over time if fortune favored. "Why me?" she asked. "You do not know me. I could be terrible-tempered or lazy or any number of things." "I saw you trying to draw water from a broken well in the heat of midday," Ryder replied. "I see a homestead that is struggling but not abandoned. I see a woman who buried her father and chose to stay and fight rather than run back to civilization. That tells me about your character. The rest we can learn as we go. And if we do not suit each other, then we make the best of it like any married couple, but I think we might suit better than you expect." He held out his hand to her. "I am offering you a choice, Dorothy. You can stay here and struggle alone, maybe make it through the winter if luck holds, or you can take a chance on a new life. I am no prince from a storybook, but I am honest, I work hard, and I will never raise a hand to you in anger. What do you say?" Dorothy looked at his outstretched hand, weathered and strong. She thought of her parents who had married for love and been happy until her mother's death 10 years ago. She thought of the long, frightening nights ahead if she stayed here alone. She thought of Ryder's calm competence, his kindness in helping a stranger, the loneliness she had heard beneath his practical words. Sometimes life offered no perfect choices, only the best option available in an imperfect world. She placed her hand in his. "Yes, I will marry you, Ryder Calloway." His hand closed around hers, warm and solid. Something that might have been relief crossed his face. "You will not regret this, Dorothy. I will do right by you." "When?" The word came out shakier than she intended. "Soon as we can arrange it. There is a circuit preacher who comes through Westcliff. He was due there about 3 days ago, so he should still be in the area. We could ride there tomorrow, be married the day after, and you could come home with me to the ranch." He squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "That is, if that suits you." "It suits me." Dorothy felt as if she were standing outside herself, watching this conversation happen to someone else. Yet beneath the surreal quality of the moment, she felt something else, a tiny flutter of hope. Perhaps this would work. Perhaps she had just made the smartest decision of her life. "You will want to pack your belongings," Ryder said, back to practical matters. "Anything you want to bring from here, we can load in my wagon. I will ride back to my ranch tonight, get the wagon and my papers, and return tomorrow morning. That will give you time to prepare and think things over. If you change your mind, I will understand. I will not change my mind." "Good." He smiled at her then, a genuine smile that transformed his serious face and made him suddenly handsome. "I will see you tomorrow morning, Dorothy Grace, soon to be Dorothy Calloway." He mounted his horse with easy grace, tipped his hat to her, and rode off toward the north. Dorothy stood by the well and watched until he disappeared over the ridge. Then she looked around at the homestead that had been her whole world, trying to memorize every detail. Tomorrow everything would change. She was terrified and excited in equal measure. That evening, Dorothy went through her parents' belongings, deciding what to keep and what to leave behind. She found her mother's wedding ring in a small wooden box and slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. She packed her clothes, her mother's recipes written in faded ink, her father's Bible, the quilt her grandmother had made, and a daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. Everything else could stay. She barely slept that night, lying in her narrow bed and listening to the coyotes howl in the distance. She thought about Ryder Calloway, trying to recall every detail of his face, the sound of his voice. Was she being foolish? Was she jumping from one uncertain situation into another? But no, she decided. A partnership with a successful rancher was far better than trying to survive alone. Dawn broke clear and bright. Dorothy washed in the cold water from the well that Ryder had fixed, dressed in her best calico, and braided her long brown hair. She made herself eat bread and cheese even though her stomach was in knots. Then she carried her packed belongings out to the porch and sat down to wait. Ryder arrived mid-morning, driving a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 strong horses. He had cleaned up, his hair still damp, wearing what was clearly his best shirt under his vest. He hopped down from the wagon seat with a smile. "Morning, Dorothy. You ready for this?" "As ready as I will ever be." Together they loaded her belongings into the wagon bed. It did not take long as she had kept only the essentials. When everything was secured, Ryder walked around the homestead with her one last time. "You could sell this land eventually," he said. "There is water and decent soil. Someone could make it work." "Later," Dorothy agreed. "Right now, I just want to move forward." They drove toward Westcliff as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The town sat nestled in a valley with the Sangre de Cristo Mountains rising dramatically to the west. It was a small settlement, just a main street with a handful of businesses, a church, a schoolhouse, and scattered homes. But to Dorothy, who had seen so few people in recent weeks, it seemed almost bustling. Ryder guided the wagon to the church, a simple white building with a cross on top. "Wait here. I will see if Reverend Matthews is still in town." He disappeared inside while Dorothy sat nervously on the wagon seat, very aware of the curious glances from people passing by. A woman in a fine dress and bonnet stopped to stare openly, then whispered something to her companion. Dorothy lifted her chin and stared right back until the woman looked away. Ryder emerged from the church with an older man in black clothing, his white hair bright in the sunlight. "Dorothy, this is Reverend Matthews. He has agreed to marry us this afternoon if you are still willing." "This afternoon?" Dorothy's voice came out high and thin. The Reverend smiled kindly. "No point in waiting once a decision is made, my dear. Mr. Calloway tells me you recently lost your father. My condolences. He also tells me this is a practical arrangement, but that does not make it any less sacred in the eyes of the Lord. Marriage is a serious commitment." "I understand that, Reverend." "Very well. Come back at 3 o'clock. You will need 2 witnesses. I am sure we can find volunteers." He nodded to them both and went back inside. Ryder helped Dorothy down from the wagon. "We have a few hours. Let me show you around town, such as it is, and we can get a meal at the hotel restaurant." They walked down the main street together, Ryder pointing out the general store, the blacksmith, the land office. People greeted him with respect, clearly knowing who he was. Several gave Dorothy curious looks but were too polite to ask questions outright. The hotel restaurant was a plain room with a dozen tables covered in checkered cloth. They ordered stew and fresh bread, and Dorothy discovered she was ravenous. As they ate, Ryder told her more about his ranch. "The house is nothing fancy, but it is solid. 2 bedrooms, a main room with a fireplace, a kitchen. I built it myself with help from some men I hired. There is a good barn, corrals, a bunkhouse for the hands, though right now I only have 2 men working for me steady. During roundup and branding, I hire more." "How many cattle do you run?" "About 500 head, give or take. Enough to make a good profit when I drive them to market, but not so many I cannot manage them." He paused, stirring his stew. "I need to be honest with you about something, Dorothy. Ranch life is hard work. I will not expect you to do things beyond your strength, but I will need your help with plenty of tasks. Chickens, garden, cooking for the hands sometimes, helping with sick animals. Can you handle that?" "I can," Dorothy said firmly. "I am not afraid of hard work, Ryder. I am only afraid of being helpless. You will never be helpless on my ranch. I will make sure you know how to do everything necessary to survive, even if something happened to me." The casual mention of his mortality sent a chill through Dorothy, but she appreciated his practical thinking. "I hope nothing happens to you." "So do I," he said with a slight smile. "I have too much left to do." After the meal, they walked to the general store where Ryder insisted on buying Dorothy a new dress for the wedding. She protested, but he was firm. A woman should have a proper dress for her wedding day, even if the wedding itself is hurried. The shopkeeper, a plump woman named Mrs. Henderson, was delighted to help. She brought out a lovely dress in pale blue cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Dorothy changed behind a curtain and emerged feeling transformed. The dress fit her slender figure perfectly, and the color brought out the blue in her eyes. Ryder stared at her for a long moment. "You look beautiful." The simple compliment, said with such sincerity, brought color to Dorothy's cheeks. "Thank you." They walked back to the church as 3 o'clock approached. Dorothy's hands trembled slightly as she climbed the steps, and Ryder took her elbow to steady her. "Nervous, terrified," she admitted. "Me too," he said quietly. "But I think we are making a good choice, Dorothy. I truly do." Inside the church, Reverend Matthews waited with 2 witnesses, the shopkeeper Mrs. Henderson and the blacksmith Mr. Torres. The ceremony was brief and simple. Dorothy and Ryder stood before the altar as the Reverend read from the Bible and asked them to make their vows. When Ryder said, "I do," his voice was strong and certain. When Dorothy said the same, her voice shook only a little. Ryder produced a simple gold band that he slipped onto her finger beside her mother's ring. His hands were steady and warm. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Matthews said. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Calloway." Ryder leaned down and pressed a gentle, brief kiss to Dorothy's lips. It was her first kiss, and though it lasted only a moment, she felt the warmth of it spread through her entire body. They signed the marriage certificate. The witnesses signed as well. And just like that, Dorothy Grace became Dorothy Calloway. It seemed too quick, too simple for such a life-changing event. Yet as they walked out of the church into the afternoon sunshine, her hand in Ryder's arm, she felt the reality of it settle over her. She was a married woman now, with a husband and a new home waiting. "Ready to see your ranch?" Ryder asked. "Our ranch," Dorothy corrected softly. His smile was worth every moment of fear and uncertainty. "Our ranch." They drove north out of Westcliff as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. The road was rough but well-traveled, cutting through grasslands dotted with juniper and pinon. The air smelled of sage and dust. Ryder pointed out landmarks as they traveled, a distinctive rock formation, the creek that ran through his property, the ridge where he had been riding when he first saw her struggling at the well. "That was only yesterday," Dorothy said wonderingly. "It feels like weeks ago." "A lot can change in a day," Ryder agreed. As the sun touched the mountain peaks, painting the sky orange and pink, they crested a rise and Dorothy saw the Calloway Ranch spread out before them. The house was larger than she had expected, built of solid timber with a wide porch facing east. The barn and corrals were in good repair, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. It looked prosperous and permanent, a real home. "Oh, Ryder," she breathed. "It is wonderful." "It is yours now," he said. "Our home." 2 men emerged from the barn as they approached, both weathered and lean in the way of working cowboys. Ryder pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and jumped down, then helped Dorothy descend. "Boys, this is my wife, Dorothy. Dorothy, these are my hands, Miguel Santos and Jack Cooper." Both men swept off their hats respectfully. Miguel was older, perhaps 40, with a lined face and kind eyes. Jack was younger, maybe 30, with red hair and a friendly grin. "Pleased to meet you, madam," Miguel said. "Welcome to the ranch." "Boss said he was going to find himself a wife," Jack added. Glad to see he was not just talking. "I never just talk," Ryder said mildly. "Help me unload Dorothy's things, would you? Put them in the house." As the men worked, Ryder led Dorothy up onto the porch and opened the front door. "Welcome home, Mrs. Calloway." The interior was simpler than she had expected, but clean and well-maintained. The main room held a stone fireplace, a table with chairs, a comfortable-looking settee, and shelves lined with books. The kitchen was off to one side, well-stocked with dishes and cookware. 2 doors led to the bedrooms. "I sleep in there," Ryder said, indicating the left door. "I thought you might want the other room at least to start. I meant what I said, Dorothy. I will not force myself on you. When and if we share a bed, it will be because you want to, not because you feel obligated." The relief Dorothy felt was overwhelming. She had been dreading this part, the wedding night with a virtual stranger. "Thank you, Ryder. That means more than you know. We are partners first," he said. "Everything else can come in time." Miguel and Jack brought in her trunk and boxes, setting them carefully in her new bedroom. When they had finished, Ryder walked them back outside, and Dorothy heard him speaking to them in low tones on the porch. She used the privacy to explore her room. It held a real bed with a mattress and quilts, a dresser, a washstand, and even a rug on the floor. A window looked out over the eastern pastures. It was the nicest room she had ever had. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her dresses in the small closet, placing her mother's things carefully on the dresser. By the time Ryder returned, she had transformed the impersonal space into something that felt slightly more like her own. "Hungry?" he asked from the doorway. "I am not much of a cook, but I can manage eggs and bacon." "Let me cook," Dorothy said. "It is what I am good at, and I would like to feel useful." Together they prepared a simple meal in the kitchen. Dorothy found the motion soothing, something familiar in this day of strangeness. Ryder watched her work with quiet appreciation, occasionally handing her items or answering questions about where things were kept. They ate at the table as darkness fell outside. Ryder lit lamps that cast warm pools of light. The house felt cozy and safe, so different from the drafty, lonely homestead she had left behind. "Tell me about your family," Dorothy said as they cleaned up after dinner. "You said you lost them." Ryder was quiet for a moment, his hands stilling in the dishwater. "Parents and 2 sisters died of cholera when I was 19 during the war. I was away fighting, did not even know they were sick until I came home on leave and found them buried. After that, there did not seem to be any point in staying in Missouri. Too many ghosts. I understand that feeling." "I suppose you do," he glanced at her. "What about your mother? You have not mentioned her much." "She died when I was 10, complications from childbirth. The baby, a boy, died with her. After that, it was just me and my father. He never remarried, though I think he was lonely. He loved my mother very much. That is a good thing, to be loved like that." "Yes," Dorothy agreed softly. "Yes, it is." They finished the dishes in comfortable silence. When everything was clean and put away, an awkward moment descended. They were married but still strangers, sharing a house but not a bed. "I usually read a bit before sleeping," Ryder said finally. "You are welcome to join me, or you can retire if you are tired." "I think I will sit with you a while," Dorothy said. The thought of being alone in her room after such a momentous day seemed unbearable. They settled on the settee, a respectable distance between them, and Ryder opened a book. But instead of reading silently, he began to read aloud, his deep voice filling the quiet house with words. It was a novel by James Fenimore Cooper, full of adventure and frontier life. Dorothy leaned back and closed her eyes, letting the story wash over her. At some point, exhaustion caught up with her and she dozed off. She woke to find her head resting on Ryder's shoulder, his arm carefully supporting her. He had stopped reading and was simply sitting there, letting her sleep. "Sorry," she mumbled, sitting up quickly. Nothing to apologize for. It has been a long day." He set the book aside. "You should get some real sleep. So should you." They rose and stood facing each other in the lamplight. On impulse, Dorothy reached up and kissed his cheek. "Thank you for today, Ryder, for everything." His hand came up to cup her face gently. "Thank you for saying yes. Sleep well, Dorothy." "You too." She went to her room and changed into her nightgown, then climbed into the comfortable bed. From the other room, she could hear Ryder moving about, the sounds of him preparing for bed. It was strange to know he was just on the other side of the wall, this man who was now her husband. But it was also comforting to not be alone. Dorothy fell asleep to the sound of an owl hooting somewhere outside, feeling safer than she had in months. The next weeks fell into a rhythm that was sometimes comfortable, sometimes awkward, but always interesting. Dorothy rose with the sun and prepared breakfast for Ryder and the two ranch hands. The men ate heartily and complimented her cooking, which pleased her more than she expected. After breakfast, while the men went about their work with the cattle and horses, Dorothy cleaned the house, tended the chickens Ryder kept, and worked in the kitchen garden. Ryder was patient and kind, teaching her about ranch life without making her feel ignorant. He showed her how to gather eggs without spooking the hens, how to tell if a fence needed mending, how to spot a cow in distress. In the evenings, they took to sitting together on the porch and watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Slowly, carefully, they began to know each other. Dorothy learned that Ryder had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. She learned that he was meticulous about caring for his animals, checking each horse and cow regularly for signs of injury or illness. She learned that he had taught himself to read during the war, struggling through primers by firelight in the army camps, and now treasured his small collection of books. Ryder learned that Dorothy had a lovely singing voice and would hum while she worked. He learned that she was brave but not reckless, willing to try new things if he explained them carefully first. He learned that she missed her father terribly but never complained about her losses, instead focusing on moving forward. They were becoming friends, which was more than Dorothy had dared hope for from this arrangement. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after their wedding, Dorothy was in the garden pulling weeds when she heard hoofbeats approaching fast. She looked up to see Miguel riding hard toward the house, his face tight with concern. Ryder emerged from the barn at a run. "Boss, we have got trouble. There is a group of men cutting out some of our cattle on the North Range, at least 6 of them, armed." Ryder's jaw tightened. "Rustlers." "Jack is with the herd." "Yes, but he is outnumbered." "Dorothy, get in the house," Ryder said sharply, already moving toward the barn. "Miguel, saddle my horse and yours. Load rifles." Dorothy's heart hammered in her chest, but she did not panic. She ran into the house, grabbed her father's old rifle from where Ryder had hung it, checked that it was loaded, and positioned herself at the window where she had a clear view of the approaches to the house. If anyone came who should not, she would be ready. Outside, she could hear Ryder and Miguel mounting up, then hoofbeats pounding away toward the north. The sudden silence afterward was oppressive. Dorothy kept watch, the rifle steady in her hands, and prayed that everyone would return safely. The wait felt endless. The sun crawled across the sky. Dorothy's shoulders ached from tension, but she did not move from her post. Finally, as afternoon shadows lengthened, she saw riders approaching. 4 men, 2 on horseback leading 2 on foot with their hands bound. She recognized Ryder and Miguel on the horses. The 2 prisoners were strangers, rough-looking men who glared at the ground as they walked. Dorothy set the rifle aside and ran outside. Ryder dismounted as she reached him, and without thinking, she threw her arms around him. He stiffened in surprise, then his arms came around her, holding her tight. "Are you hurt?" she asked against his chest. "No, we are all fine. Jack is staying with the herd." He pulled back to look at her face. "You were worried." "Of course I was worried. What happened?" "We caught these two trying to drive off 15 of my cattle. The other 4 ran when we showed up. These idiots were not fast enough." His voice was hard, angry in a way Dorothy had not heard before. "Miguel, take them to town and turn them over to the sheriff." "I will file a formal complaint tomorrow." "Yes, boss." Miguel hauled the prisoners toward the wagon. Ryder looked down at Dorothy, his expression softening. "You handled yourself well, staying calm and armed. I told you I know how to shoot." "I know you did. But it is different when trouble actually comes." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "Thank you for being strong. Thank you for coming back safe." Something shifted between them in that moment, a deepening of connection that went beyond friendship. Dorothy saw it in Ryder's eyes, felt it in the way he held her. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not pull away. She lifted her face to his, and this time when they kissed, it was not the brief, formal kiss of their wedding day. This kiss was real, warm, and searching, full of relief and emerging feelings neither had quite named yet. When they finally separated, both were breathing hard. Ryder rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks," he admitted. "Why did you wait?" "I did not want you to feel pressured. You married me out of necessity, not choice." Dorothy pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I chose to say yes, Ryder. Maybe the circumstances were not ideal, but I chose you, and I am glad I did." "Are you?" "Yes." She smiled, feeling suddenly light and free. "I am falling in love with you. I did not expect it, but I am." The joy that blazed across Ryder's face was beautiful to see. "I have been halfway in love with you since you put your hand in mine and said yes. You are strong and brave and kind, Dorothy. Everything I could have hoped for and more." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Dorothy felt heat pool in her belly. When he lifted her into his arms and carried her toward the house, she did not protest. When he paused at her bedroom door, questioning, she shook her head and nodded toward his room. Their room now. They made love as the sun set, tentative and then passionate, learning each other in new ways. It was Dorothy's first time, and Ryder was patient and gentle, guiding her through nervousness into pleasure. Afterward, she lay in his arms feeling transformed, no longer a frightened girl trying to survive, but a woman building a life with a man she loved. "No more separate rooms," Ryder murmured into her hair. "I want to fall asleep with you every night and wake up with you every morning." "Yes," Dorothy agreed, tracing patterns on his chest. "That is what I want too." Life on the ranch continued, but everything felt different now. Dorothy moved her belongings into Ryder's room, and they fell into the intimate rhythms of a truly married couple. They worked side by side during the day and held each other at night. The ranch hands noticed the change and seemed pleased, commenting that the boss was happier than they had ever seen him. As autumn approached, Dorothy discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but waited to be sure before telling Ryder. One evening after supper, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, she took his hand and placed it on her still flat belly. "There is someone else sharing this ranch with us now," she said softly. "A baby. Due in the spring, I think." Ryder stared at her, his eyes going wide. Then he let out a whoop of joy that startled the horses in the corral. He picked Dorothy up and spun her around, then set her down quickly. "I should not have done that. Are you all right? Should you be resting? Do you feel sick?" Dorothy laughed at his sudden nervousness. "I am fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, Ryder. I am strong and healthy." "You are carrying my child," he said wonderingly, his hand returning to her belly. "Our child. A family. Dorothy, I never thought I would have this again after I lost everyone." "Well, you have it now," she said, covering his hand with hers. "We have it. A real family." He kissed her tenderly. "I love you, Dorothy Calloway. I love you too." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the autumn and winter. Ryder became adorably protective, trying to prevent Dorothy from doing any heavy work. She humored him to a point but refused to be treated like an invalid. She was pregnant, not broken. As her belly swelled, Dorothy prepared for the baby's arrival. She sewed tiny clothes, arranged one corner of their bedroom into a nursery space, and corresponded with a midwife in Westcliff who agreed to come when the time arrived. Ryder built a beautiful cradle from pine, sanding it smooth and carving flowers into the headboard. Winter in the New Mexico mountains was cold but beautiful. Snow transformed the landscape into something magical. Dorothy loved watching the cattle move across the white pastures, their breath steaming in the frigid air. She and Ryder spent long evenings by the fire, talking about their hopes for their child and their future together. "I want to expand the ranch," Ryder said one night, his hand resting on her belly where the baby kicked actively. "Add more land, build up the herd. Create something lasting that we can pass down to our children. Children, you are expecting more than one, are not you?" he grinned. "I want a whole house full of them if you are willing, brothers and sisters for this little one. A real family." Dorothy thought of her lonely childhood after her mother died. "I would like that very much." As winter gave way to early spring, Dorothy's time drew near. The midwife, a competent woman named Mrs. Pierce, arrived 2 weeks before the baby was due and stayed in the small guest room off the kitchen. Ryder became increasingly nervous as the days passed, checking on Dorothy constantly. Labor began on a warm April morning when the wildflowers were just starting to bloom. It was long and difficult, lasting through the day and into the night. Ryder paced the main room, refusing to leave the house even when Miguel suggested he might want to go check the cattle. He could hear Dorothy's cries of pain and felt helpless, unable to do anything but wait. Finally, near midnight, the baby's cry pierced the air. Ryder froze, his heart pounding. Mrs. Pierce emerged from the bedroom, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Calloway. A big, healthy boy. Your wife is tired but well." Ryder did not wait to hear more. He rushed past the midwife into the bedroom where Dorothy lay propped against pillows, pale and exhausted but smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. Ryder approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe. "Meet your son," Dorothy said softly, tilting the blanket so he could see the small red face, the eyes squinting in the lamplight, the tiny fists waving. "He is perfect," Ryder whispered, reaching out to touch one small hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his thumb with surprising strength. "You are perfect. You did amazingly, Dorothy." "We did it," she corrected. "We made him together." Ryder sat carefully on the edge of the bed, and Dorothy placed the baby in his arms. He held his son with infinite care, marveling at the weight of him, the reality of this new life they had created. "What should we name him?" Dorothy asked. They had discussed names but never quite decided. Now, holding his son, Ryder thought of his own father, a good man who had loved his family. "What about Robert James Calloway?" "I like that," Dorothy said. "Robert, little Robbie." Baby Robert became the center of their world. Ryder proved to be a devoted father, getting up in the night to bring the baby to Dorothy for feeding, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor for hours when Robert was fussy. Miguel and Jack built a larger crib, and the baby's things gradually took over more of the bedroom. As Robert grew from infant to baby to toddler, the ranch prospered. Ryder did expand, purchasing adjacent land when it became available. The herd grew to over 1,000 head. He hired more permanent hands and built a larger bunkhouse. Dorothy managed the household, raising Robert, maintaining the garden, and helping with the business accounts. They were partners in every sense, building something significant together. When Robert was 2, Dorothy became pregnant again. This time she felt more confident, knowing what to expect. The pregnancy was easier, and when her time came, she delivered a healthy baby girl with much less difficulty than the first birth. They named her Ryder Grace Calloway, honoring Dorothy's maiden name. Ryder was smitten with his daughter from the first moment, declaring her the most beautiful baby ever born. Dorothy laughed at his obvious favoritism but understood it. There was something special about a father with his little girl. The years flowed by, busy and full. Robert grew into a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, learning about cattle and horses almost before he could walk properly. Deanna was quieter, preferring to stay near her mother, helping with the chickens and the garden. 2 more children followed, a boy named Daniel and another girl they called Elizabeth. The house that had once felt spacious became crowded with the cheerful chaos of children, and Ryder added 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The ranch became one of the most successful in the territory. Ryder was known as a fair employer and an honest businessman. Dorothy became respected in the community, hosting gatherings at the ranch and helping organize a proper school in Westcliff. The lonely rancher and the desperate young woman who had met at a broken well had built not just a marriage of convenience but a genuine love story. When Robert was 10, old enough to understand, Ryder told him the story of how he and Dorothy met. "I saw your mother struggling at the well and I knew right then she was special," Ryder said as the family sat around the dinner table. "I fixed the well and then I asked her to share my life. Best decision I ever made." "Mama, why did you say yes?" Deanna asked. She was 8 now, bright and curious. Dorothy looked around the table at her family, at the children she and Ryder had made together, at the man who had offered her not just survival but true partnership and love. "Because I saw in your father something I needed, not just someone to take care of me, but someone I could build a life with. And I was right." Ryder reached across the table and took her hand, squeezing gently. 20 years of marriage had added some silver to his dark hair and lines to his face, but his eyes, when he looked at her, still held the same warmth and devotion they had that day at the well. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too." The children groaned good-naturedly at their parents' display of affection, but Dorothy could see them smiling too. They had grown up surrounded by love, knowing they were wanted and cherished. That was the greatest gift she and Ryder could give them. As the years continued, the children grew into adults. Robert proved to have his father's gift with cattle and took over more of the ranch operations. Deanna married a neighboring rancher's son, a good man who treated her well. Daniel became fascinated with law and went east to study, though he promised to return. Elizabeth, the youngest and most adventurous, talked about becoming a teacher. Through it all, Dorothy and Ryder remained the foundation, their love deepening with each passing year. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, illness and injury, the normal trials of life. But they had weathered them together, partners in every sense of the word. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Ryder took Dorothy back to her father's old homestead. It had been sold years ago to a young couple trying their luck at farming, and they had made it prosper in ways Dorothy's father never could. The broken well that had brought Dorothy and Ryder together had been replaced with a newer, deeper one. "You ever regret saying yes that day?" Ryder asked as they stood where they had first met. Dorothy looked at the man who had been her husband for a quarter century, the father of her children, her best friend and truest love. Not for a single moment. You gave me everything, Ryder. A home, a family, a life full of purpose and love. How could I possibly regret that? You gave me just as much, he said, pulling her close. You took a lonely rancher and made him the richest man in the territory. Not in money, though we have done well enough, but in all the things that truly matter. They kissed there in the shadow of the old well. Two people who had taken a chance on each other and won everything that mattered. The ranch continued to prosper for many more years. Robert eventually took over full operations, running the ranch with the same care and integrity his father had shown. He married a strong young woman and started giving Dorothy and Ryder grandchildren to spoil. Deanna had 3 children of her own, and the ranch house was often full of the next generation, running and playing just as their parents had done. Daniel returned from his studies and opened a law practice in Westcliff, making a name for himself as a defender of small ranchers and homesteaders against larger, less scrupulous operations. Elizabeth did become a teacher, running the school in town and making a real difference in the lives of her students. As Ryder and Dorothy moved into their later years, they gradually stepped back from the daily operations of the ranch, though Ryder never fully retired. He was out checking fence lines when he was 70, and Dorothy was still maintaining her garden at 65. They had built something that would last beyond them, a legacy of hard work, integrity, and love. One evening, sitting on the porch they had sat on thousands of times before, watching yet another spectacular sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, Dorothy leaned her head on Ryder's shoulder. "We did good, did not we?" she said softly. "We did better than good," Ryder replied, his arm around her. "We built a life together, raised good children, created something lasting. When I saw you at that well all those years ago, I knew you were my chance at happiness, but I never imagined it would be this good." "Neither did I," Dorothy admitted. "I thought I was just trying to survive. I did not know I was finding everything I had ever wanted." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the mountains and the first stars appeared. From inside the house came the sounds of their family, Robert and his wife preparing dinner, grandchildren laughing and playing. This was what they had built, not just a successful ranch but a real home full of love and life. As full darkness fell and the coyotes began their evening songs, Ryder helped Dorothy to her feet. They walked inside together, hand in hand just as they had walked through life for over 40 years. The lonely rancher had found his partner, the desperate young woman had found her home, and together they had created something beautiful that would endure long after they were gone. Their love story had started at a broken well on a hot summer day, with a simple offer and a brave acceptance. It had grown through shared work and growing understanding into something deep and lasting. It had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs. It had created a family and built a legacy. And through it all, at the center of everything, was the simple truth that they had chosen each other and kept choosing each other every single day. The ranch would pass to Robert and eventually to his children. The house would ring with the laughter of future generations. The land would continue to provide and sustain. But the greatest legacy Dorothy and Ryder left behind was not measured in acres or cattle or buildings. It was measured in the example they set of what true partnership could be, of what love looked like when it was built on respect, trust, and genuine affection. When Ryder passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, surrounded by his family, Dorothy grieved deeply but did not fall apart. He had taught her to be strong, to face whatever came with courage and grace. She lived 3 more years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, telling them stories of the early days, of how their grandfather had seen her struggling and offered her the world. When Dorothy died at 81, she was buried beside Ryder on a hillside overlooking the ranch, just as her parents were buried overlooking their homestead. The entire community came to the funeral, testament to the impact she and Ryder had made on the territory. At the graveside, Robert spoke for all the children. Our parents built more than a ranch. They built a family, a community, a legacy of love and hard work. They showed us that sometimes life gives you unexpected opportunities, and wisdom lies in having the courage to take them. My father saw my mother struggling at a well, he fixed it, and he asked if she would share his life. She said yes. And that simple act of courage from both of them created all of this. He gestured to the gathered crowd, to the prosperous ranch spread out below, to his siblings and their children. We are all here because two people took a chance on each other 45 years ago. That is the legacy we will carry forward. The grandchildren placed wildflowers on both graves, the same kind of flowers that had been blooming the day Robert was born. As the crowd dispersed, the family lingered, reluctant to leave. But eventually, they too walked back down the hillside toward the ranch house where dinner was waiting and life continued. The sun set that evening in spectacular fashion, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold and crimson. The cattle grazed peacefully in the pastures. The house glowed with lamplight and echoed with the voices of another generation. The ranch that Ryder built and Dorothy helped sustain carried on, a testament to what could be built when two people committed to facing life together. And if sometimes, in the quiet moments of dusk, the family thought they heard echoes of laughter from the porch, or saw two figures walking hand in hand toward the barn, they smiled and went about their work. Love like that did not simply end. It wove itself into the land, into the very foundations of the home it had built. Dorothy and Ryder's love story had started with a broken well and a brave offer. It had grown into something that would last forever, passed down through the generations as an example of what was possible when two people chose to build a life together, one day at a time, with courage, respect, and deepening love. The ranch prospered for generations, always held by the Calloway family, always maintained with the same values Ryder and Dorothy had established. And every Calloway child grew up knowing the story of how it all began, with a lonely rancher who saw a woman struggling, fixed what was broken, and had the courage to ask her to share not just his ranch, but his entire life. It remained forever, a story of hope, courage, and the transformative power of love.